to capacitate institutions, and by that we have to have a health workforce that is up to the task. But we also need training in financing. So do you think that in the past, from the documents that government have released, that this is clear that we are closer to implementing NHI? Is there a legislative network that exists for this?
I mean, at a basic level, SABC, we've seen government pilot NHI in different sites across the country. But what we have not seen, and I think what has been the failure of government, is to actually show, and particularly the media as well, to show what has happened in those sites and if those pilot projects are indeed working. Because I think the opposition to NHI is understandable from the side of private medical care organizations like your medical aids. But on the side of those who can afford medical aid, I think it's just the general fear that the services will be compromised if you roll out NHI. So at a basic level, I think it starts with government ensuring that within the public health system, although you can argue by the flip of the token that most of the skills are mostly concentrated in the private sector because that is where the doctors are going, because that is where the money is, and also there's less stress. And also there are more resources for them. So although you can argue that if you were to share that equitably, that you would be able to actually roll that out. But I think government has a problem, has a challenge here, where it has to actually make sure that hospitals are seen to be working and that there are those pockets of excellence. We have seen them. I mean, generally, the public health system, I mean, if you look at the new hospitals and also what they're able to do, you can see that there is an improvement, but it's just a matter of just rolling that out and ensuring that there is buy-in from all the parties. I do not believe, though, there will ever be a day where everyone agrees on what form NHI.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I was going to say that government argues, though, that some of the best innovations at hospitals in terms of treatments has been seen at public hospitals, and all they're asking is for the private sector to reduce the cost so that everybody else can have access to it. But let's go on to education. The future of work, the president did speak about that. And I'm wondering if we are still failing to match up the economy's needs with not only the curriculum that we have at schools. Is digitization really going to make all that much of a difference?
I think it is quite an interesting introduction, because I think I've looked at all the ANC documents previously and you've never actually seen technology being central to a manifesto. And it looks like someone in government has actually realized that there is a future, and most of the companies that are growing are actually technological companies, that there needs to be a focus when you're talking of SMMEs, that you actually look at technological startups. But I think talking about the digital education and also computer studies and computer analytics in the curriculum, for me it looks like very far off, because it means that it needs to be developed. But as a starting point, I think it would be interesting to see how that SME fund that the president speaks about, how it is able to do that in terms of making sure that it's boosting those young people who are interested in technology, and that if they are able to actually access those funds and be able to grow within that space without, because I think currently in terms of technological startups, they mostly rely on venture capitalists and those messy investors. It is interesting that the government is looking into that space. And I think the other thing that is interesting for me is actually President Ramaphosa talking about the extension of free education to second year of tertiary. Because if you remember that at Nasrec, part of the push by the so-called NDZ Zuma faction was that there was an expectation that President Ramaphosa would not support that, but it looks like he seems to be committed to it and also rolling it out. Obviously, the nitty-gritties of it and also where that money will come from is another story altogether.
It's a very interesting conversation about money. I mean, Kai Satoli, I mean, on the one side, I mean, there's some research, I think, from academic research published in India that suggests that just introducing tablets to children doesn't actually improve marks. But when you consider the problems we've had rolling out textbooks around the country, I mean, Limpopo in particular, also, most children, you probably need 10 textbooks per child. One tablet, you can buy them, you know, almost anywhere for about 600-700 rand. I imagine someone somewhere in government is going to be making the case for savings.
I mean, you know, when we hear this, the idea that the government now wants to have this universal rollout of, you know, these devices, the first question is there enough electrification across the system that would enable those students to actually use these devices? And more importantly, when you then talk about internet penetration, particularly particularly in rural communities, the cost of actually, accessing the internet, who's going to bear that particular cost? Because the key here is that there's no point in us rolling out all these devices only for the students to then end up with these things that cannot be operated. And I think the key issue here is that we firstly have to take a step back and ask, is this actually what the core deficiency is in our public education system? And my view is that if that isn't the core deficiency in our public education system, we have significant problems when it comes to issues of literacy and just the ability of young people to read. Now, of course, you need to ensure that that part is sorted before you then say, this is how we then electrify the public education system. And I suspect that perhaps in this one instance, we've jumped the gun and actually failed to fix the underlying problems.
Kai, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there with you. Thank you very much to both of you, Sibongalo and Kaya Sithole. We're going to take a quick break and then we return and look at more of some of those issues raised in the ANC's People's Manifesto. And of course, hear more from you, your views on the manifesto, whether or not it was convincing or not. Stay tuned.